Priscilla vs. Wrath has got to be one of the more unique showdowns in ReZero. Where we do usually get a strong clash of ideals like this, never have the two opponents been so incompatible. Like, here we have Priscilla whose sense of self makes her immune to Wrath's authority, while Wrath on the other hand sees her as a trial that must be overcome in order to see her husband. Neither will flinch when it comes to the mindset they've established for themselves, and in a way that makes their interactions entertainingly absurd. I mean, for a good bit you probably couldn't even call it interacting. It was just two very assertive people talking at each other. Liliana's place in this was also a bit more than what we saw in the anime, so if you want to see the full extent of this showdown with Princess and Songstress, stick around since this'll be everything left out from the anime. To start things off here at the plaza in front of the control tower, Priscilla's real objective was never to defeat the Archbishop, it was instead simply to reclaim the floodgates. Should that happen without having to confront Wrath at all, then Liliana was happy to complete the mission without a life-threatening battle. Well, Sirius's debut would shatter any hopes of that, charming Liliana in the process with her authority. There was, however, a question Liliana would ask prior to that, and that was whether Kiritaka was okay or not. Since someone was preemptively killing members of the council, Liliana wanted to know if Kiritaka had survived. It was a question to which Sirius would respond yes, since she too needed Kiritaka alive as well. She referred to him as the final member of the council, indicating the others had been killed by whoever was hunting them. So, with him being the only one left, Sirius would confirm that he was taken into protective custody. She would then pull out the gospel in a scene that we didn't get to see in the anime, identifying it as the means with which they were able to save Kiritaka. You see, had it not been for the gospel's prophetic words, then Kiritaka would have been killed with the rest of the council. This admiration towards the gospel placed Liliana more under the effects of Sirius's authority, leading to the kiss which would dispel it. Now, part of what makes the ensuing conversation so interesting is that every person participating had an incredibly strong ego. That being the case, they all insisted on monopolizing the dialogue in a way that made conversation pointless. Priscilla's hostility barely interacted with Sirius's indignation, while Liliana's gibberish stood far off on its own. Liliana would then confirm one more time the safety of Kiritaka, then Sirius would call forth the civilians still under the power of her authority. It was a group of 1,000 all unified as one, moving in perfect unison towards the princess and songstress. This should have been where Liliana stepped in to prove her worth, but while still in disarray from the events going on around her, Priscilla would have to step in instead. She would leverage the urges of basic human instinct. It didn't matter how brainwashed everyone was, a human's primal fear of fire wouldn't allow them to walk right into one. So, Priscilla would then relentlessly mock the idea becoming one was a form of love, since to her she was a living example disproving it. As a person exemplifying the most outstanding figure in the world, she truly believed her magnificence could never be joined with those who were just mediocre. It was a harsh yet firm statement that denied everything Sirius believed in. A bold provocation Liliana couldn't help but think was a bit heavy-handed. Sirius, however, took this as a challenge, accepting Priscilla simply as an anomaly who needed to be shown the power of love. Now, in the meantime, Liliana would rush towards the fiery barrier separating her and the people, only to be overwhelmed by how hot it was. The thing about this fire, though, is that although it maintained its heat, it didn't actually burn her. So, while this white flame was significantly hotter than a normal fire, it couldn't burn her or even leave a mark. The only thing she felt was the pain from how hot it was. Naturally, this prevented her from singing to the best of her ability, and that was a problem Priscilla was very much aware of. Sirius wouldn't give her time to find a solution though, since her omnidirectional assault kept her very much occupied. Defending against it wasn't really that much of a problem, but helping Liliana in the process was where things started to get tough. Liliana's encouragement did enhance her momentum though, so that in turn made navigating the chains a whole lot easier. It was an epic clash between elegance and ferocity. Where Priscilla's sword dance was this graceful display of movement, Sirius's performance was more this fierce mishmash of incomprehensible motions. To anyone skilled with such a weapon though, it was clearly technique developed through years of rigorous training. So, it was evident by the effort being put in that this battle was important to her as well. Not only was Priscilla fighting for something important herself, Sirius too fought to prove that no matter the heart, there always remained the possibility of change. To her, so long as you were alive, feelings could grow. Obviously, not much progress was being made on conveying that, which is why she would proceed to name drop the stories we saw in the anime. This instantly got under Priscilla's skin, leading her to charge head-on without regard for anything else. Like, it didn't matter that killing Sirius would have killed every other person present, since in this moment, Priscilla just wanted to kill her. Her desire was solely that, and it didn't matter who else would have been lost in the process, Liliana included. Now, this attack would have cut Sirius's head clean off, if not for a phenomenon that shouldn't have been possible. You see, right before Priscilla was about to strike, her momentum had slowed completely. It was as if time itself had turned against her. This was a common trope Liliana recognized as time seeming to move slowly just before death, except here it was happening to only Priscilla. So it was this sudden change in speed that allowed Sirius to casually counter with the attack we saw here. As for what it was that triggered Priscilla, the names mentioned were all famous stories from the past. Not a single one Liliana hadn't heard herself, and she'd even earned her keep performing some of them. Why is it then that Priscilla would get so mad at such well-renowned tales? Well, that's an answer we won't find out until next season. We do, however, discover the logic Sirius herself abides by, and that's all built off a foundation of mutual understanding. You see, she was a firm believer that by sharing the experiences of others, only then could one start to love one another. To her, it was the human ability to feel empathy and sympathy that made all this possible. And while it did make sense on paper, the level she took it to was far too extreme. This, however, was logical enough to convince others, so unless you had an unbending sense of self like Priscilla's, Sirius's tempting words would go on to affect anyone who could hear them. Now, the reason Liliana found this so ridiculous is because, as a person with the unique ability to hear all the voices around her at once, she knew there could be an infinite variety of similar voices while none exactly the same. The same could be said for emotions too, so after seeing the state of the people around her, she knew from experience that what Sirius was saying was wrong. Like, sure, everyone in a crowd could be smiling, but that didn't mean that they were all feeling the exact same thing. It was this manufactured equality that Liliana found disgusting, leading her to prove her point with her music. Such a rejection had come off as quite a shock since it wasn't a strong sense of self enabling it this time. No, where Liliana's passion came from was her pride as a minstrel. Her understanding of others was what allowed her to overcome Sirius's authority too now. This led Sirius to engage with a more intense offense than before, forcing Priscilla to take a more defensive approach. Once again, this wasn't because she was weaker though, but was rather because she couldn't do anything to attack. If she did, and she certainly could, Priscilla was well aware of the massacre that would come as a result of it. That being the case, what we saw here was simply Priscilla stalling. She had placed complete trust in Liliana's ability to dispel Sirius's authority and was simply waiting for it to happen. First, Liliana needed to ascend the tower though, and this, I promise, was far more difficult than you may think. Like, imagine running through the flames of a burning building, minus any of the permanent damage to you. You can still feel every bit of the heat, but it's just you don't get burned or injured from it. So imagine the feeling of getting burned without it actually happening, then imagine experiencing it relentlessly multiple floors up the tower. This was the pain Liliana had to fight through, and it would continue for the duration of her song as well. As unbearable as it was though, she knew she needed to follow through with her job before succumbing to it. Now, this is where we get to Liliana's life story, which for the most part was depicted accurately. An important aspect I believe needs to be explained a bit more though is the realization that her identity wasn't what she thought it was. You see, the heroes she thought were her friends in the stories she sang about were actually nothing more than strangers completely unrelated to her. Sure, Liliana could love them all she wanted, but at the end of the day they could never love her back. This led her to feel incredibly worthless, and it made her question why she was even doing what she did in the first place. It was after 4 days of overcoming sickness consisting of every ailment imaginable that finally Liliana would gain inspiration of her own. Her 9-year journey on the road had led her to this. She had finally come to understand how to create true music. Everything she sang before was something else entirely, but this right here was something she could call her own. It was a gift and a send-off to the heroes she once thought of as irreplaceable friends. From here, she would rediscover what singing these pieces meant, and in the process commit to creating the relationship she wanted with those she could actually call her friends. Her dream, while still to be the minstrel queen, also now included bragging about how amazing her actual friends were. That was a massive turning point for her back then, and her song here on top of the building was a turning point for her now. The way she felt singing here was the same as when she sang for the first time as a true minstrel. The pain from the flames certainly made her want to cry out in agony, but knowing so many people were waiting to hear her voice helped her to push through regardless. Now, normally Liliana's song wouldn't have been able to reach anyone, but what awakened during this pivotal moment was her blessing of telepathy. Until now it was nothing but a simple boon, but here it transformed into the true power it was meant to be. As the novel describes it, it was a divine manifestation of musical powers supported by her true strength as a singer. A heavenly gift birthed from her resolve to lay everything on the line here. This wasn't something Liliana was aware of herself, but it was exactly what was taking place while she was singing. Despite the building burning hot enough to cook a steak all the way through, Liliana's burning feet were of no concern when it came to the song she was singing. It was a display of dedication that demonstrated her worth beyond just mere amusement. Priscilla understood Liliana was going through torture only a fool would endure, but her choice to remain up there was proof a fool with talent could still bring about the impossible. They were efforts she knew needed to be rewarded. As for what was happening with Sirius, well, Liliana's song was something of the same essence of her authority, except the way it brought people together was fundamentally different. Her song allowed people to understand each other through a different means. This meant her blessing was on par with Wrath's authority, and if strong enough to overcome Sirius herself, the effects of it would channel through her authority and spread to every person across the city. That was the true nature of Liliana's music now. Sirius's true nature would be revealed shortly after as well, since in a fit of rage she would release all the bandages covering her body. What hid underneath were the golden chains wrapped around her torso and limbs, flesh and blood oozing from the parts they clinged onto. This allowed her to unleash the full potential of her weapons, but at the same time came at the cost of her skin being peeled, flesh being shredded, and bones being ground away. The blood would then be turned into fuel for her own flames, creating this massive tsunami of fire that should have turned Priscilla into cinders. This would have been the outcome for anyone, but Priscilla possessed her sunlight blade. All it took was a single swing of this legendary magical sword to dispel the fire. This, however, was just a distraction, and before Sirius could even see the result of her attack, she was already running straight to the tower, intent on tearing it down. Priscilla would catch up to her before she could, but a surprise attack from another chain hidden under the bandages of Sirius's leg landed a direct hit, stopping Priscilla in her tracks. Once again, no damage was done, but the opening it made gave Sirius enough time to topple the tower like how we saw in the anime. It was a move which should have put an end to Liliana's song right there and then, if not for her resolve to see things through fully. So, as the floor crumbled beneath her, Liliana continued singing, knowing that the moment she stopped, Wrath's authority would take full control again. Priscilla knew as much as well, and that led her to focus on Sirius rather than save Liliana here. That being the case, what came as a result was the final clash between two people whose system of values were utterly incompatible. Since both were built upon a flawless and unshakable foundation, that left zero room for one to sway the other. So the only thing left to do after was fight. Priscilla couldn't even care for the trivial problem that was Tina, and proceeded with her attack since she could simply not cut something that she didn't wish to cut. It was an ability that suited the person she was perfectly, one that disregarded any and everything she didn't care about. So that would conclude the battle with Wrath, bringing an end to what would have been a very one-sided battle had Wrath's authority not made things difficult. But yeah, That's one more fight down from ReZero Season 3, and I'll be continuing with the others next week. If you liked this one, then leave a like, and if you want to see more, then consider subscribing. Until next time though, ciao!